Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the PixelCast. I am the founder of PixelFest, Jeremy Alessi, and tonight I am joined by indie developer Tony Powell. He is from Maryland, but he came down in 2016 and joined us at the first PixelFest. And Tony also has an award named after him at MAGFest for presence, which is probably one of the things that most people will remember about Tony. He has this amazing presence when he's demoing his games. And you can see in the background a couple of shots with Tony where I think, even though he's not coming through with us on video tonight, that you can feel his presence. So how's it going tonight, Tony? How are you doing?
Hey, Jeremy, doing very well. Doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm so excited to share your story and your adventures with the PixelFest community once again.
Absolutely, dude.
So, I'm sort of in the way here of there's a shot in the bottom left corner, which is of Mighty Mashers, which previously was called That Rock Paper Scissors game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been working on That Rock Paper Scissors game, or Mighty Mashers? We should start using the new branding, Mighty Mashers.
Mighty Mashers, yeah. I started working on Mighty Mashers, I want to say this was in summer of 2013.
Nice, okay.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been in development for a while, mostly because this is the first game that my own company is going to be releasing under its own name. I've also worked on a couple of educational video games for different clients in the area, and I'm getting ready to wrap up one right now called Agronomics for the Maryland STEM Festival.
I know there's a shot in the bottom right corner that you can't see right now, and the top right actually. So for people that are going to be watching this on video, and some will be listening to an audio, Agronomics is represented there on the right side. And so I've been really excited about that title because, and this is going to sound redundant, but because of the title screen, I guess now, where you've got the planet and you can see the sun and the moon like going around.
Yeah, that actually is a portion in the game where you're speeding up time so your crops can grow faster.
Right. I did play it, so yes, I remember that. And you always have that out though. I've always seen that. I always saw that in screenshots, and yes, I do remember now playing it and being able to speed up time, which was really cool.
Awesome, yeah. The version that we had up on the Maryland STEM Festival website is still was a really early version. Mm-hmm. We're going to be seeing the final version of the game really soon. I'll be wrapping it up hopefully by the end of the end of this month.
Okay.
Not sure exactly when they're going to release it though. When they're going to put it out there.
Man, I'll tell you what, it's a really cool game. It reminds me of like WarioWare, but with an educational spin on it, I guess, because you have all these different game mechanics, and you have to go through the process of farming essentially. But with each stage of farming, there's a new game mechanic that goes along with it. So it keeps it fresh, and all the game mechanics are really well done too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. So how did that come about, though? I mean, I want to get into Mighty Masters and the cons and all this stuff, but I have to admit, I don't know that much about agronomics. But you know that I pinged you a couple of years ago. I was like, hey, man, I want to actually play this game. This looks really cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Basically, I think the very beginning stages where I was showcasing my Mighty Masher game at the Maryland STEM Festival events that I had seen on Facebook one day. Mm-hmm. And I attended those, and there was probably about 1,000 kids or so at each of these events. And there was other organizations that were STEM related, like NASA, like military, other like teaching accountants and things like that. Things that have to do with fields that have to do with STEM. But I was the only video game there. And once kids found out that a video game was there, they all came rushing at my booth and stuff.
Yep,
I had like 200 kids, And I remember like looking over into the distance on the other side of the room. And there's NASA like looking at me like, "Hey man, you're gonna send a couple over here?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't know what to do." And so the director, Phil Rogowski, the director of the Maryland STEM Festival, had continued to invite me to more of these events. And we always drew a great crowd. And eventually, one day out of the blue, he sent me an email saying, "Hey, Tony, I have an idea for a video game, and I was wondering if you could help me build it." And we set up a meeting. We talked about it. We figured out what the Maryland STEM Festival was really looking for, and we pitched some other ideas, and then we started development on the video game. The game has been in development for I want to say like 2 years or so.
Okay, yeah, it's been a little while. I remember when you first started posting those pics, and I played that early version of it. I guess that was on the website. That's what you had sent me a link to, and yeah, I mean, I have to say, like right away, it looked intriguing. Though there's just something about, especially that one scene. I guess is that like a hex grid? It's like a 3D hex grid, something. I don't know.
Yeah, that was that stage is representing tilling the soil, which is the first step that people should take before they start to plant their seeds and things like that. They want to remove all the rocks and any debris that might be underneath the soil, so that the roots have a chance to really grow out.
Right.
I'm not, and you know, the weird thing too about working on this game is I have like zero experience with the agriculture and farming and like that. But like during the process of development, and I had to study a bunch of different things about farming. I started like looking out my window where there's this flower bed just outside our window. Looking at that, I bet I can grow some tomatoes out there.
That's awesome. I got to tell you, I actually want to have a farm. I keep. It's something I've been talking about for a couple of years, but I had a garden maybe back in like 2010. I didn't do a good job of taking care of it. I want to return to that, get another garden going, but eventually I'd like to have some type of farm. So it's something that the older I get, the more intriguing the idea of farming is to me. And I think at the end of, there's been a couple of like movies and stuff where I could tell there's other people sort of thinking the same thing. But at the end of the Avengers movie, that there's these scenes where they just go out to someplace quiet, right? And they're just hanging out either on a farm or just in the wilderness somewhere or something. And there's just something peaceful about it. I don't know, something intriguing about it these days. I don't know why.
It's totally true. Like I got to meet a lot of different farmers out here in the Frederick area. The Maryland is really huge on agriculture. And especially the furthest east and the furthest west portions of Maryland.
Right.
They have a huge agricultural field. And I remember like meeting a bunch of these farmers, and they all have the same down to earth, very relaxed, very calm, like in tune with nature kind of feel.
Yep.
You know, like I'm all digital and stuff. You know, like I don't get to put my hands in the soil or anything like that. But like getting to, I've had like I got to meet with a few different farmers and stuff like that on their ranches, and hear about the things that they deal with farming and stuff, and like just how calm and relaxed they are and how in tune with earth they are. It's just something that's surreal. It's like a whole nother lifestyle that I wasn't even like tuned into and stuff. So it's actually really cool. I could totally see the appeal with wanting to start a farm.
Yeah. I need more experience with it, but every time I'm hanging out on a farm or, it's just like, yeah, this is nice. Yeah, and when you have that all digital lifestyle, especially for a long time, like, I've been developing games now like way over 20 years. I've spent a lot of time sitting at a keyboard. And so there's this side of me that's like, all right, I've been doing that for a long time. At some point I see myself turning over the keyboard and, just sort of reconvening with nature a little bit. I don't know. It just seems appealing at this point. And I think it's interesting. I think there's going to be a swing back that way a little bit, because I remember 20 plus years ago, like in the 90s, I have a good friend, and they have a farm. They still have it, but we used to hang out there a lot. And I would go to the farm and I would talk all day about like my Sega Saturn or whatever video game I happened to be playing at the time. I remember one time specifically being really into my Sega Saturn and talking about it the whole time that we were out there on the farm. And it seemed like back then we had technology, and it was, it was sort of novel though at the time. It was kind of like, yeah, I have this thing, but it's a very small part of my life. And now technology is so ubiquitous, and we spend so many hours of the day looking at screens and so on and so forth, that getting back out on the farm, it seems necessary, in fact. Like I said, putting your hands in the soil, feeling the sun, the crops, walking around, and there's like a scent in the air that you get when you're out there that you don't get any other time. So
yeah, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth and stuff, right. Then, like it's just being able to reconnect with nature and see exactly what's the real world. Because for us, working so working, building video games, we're building our own digital world, and that in a way becomes like a reality to us in a slight weird way. But getting out there into the field, getting your feet into the soil, your hands in the soil, and just knowing what dirt feels like, and it's a surreal experience, and it's something that, like you said, it's absolutely necessary. It becomes necessary to do.
Yeah.
After a while.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's such a cool story about how you came up with that. I love how you were just showing off Mighty Masters at a show though, and this just sort of organically cultivated from you doing that, which is pretty neat. I didn't really know the story behind it, but now is this something where was it part of a grant or something like that? I mean, how did they? It's just so interesting to have like a game developer, just like we're gonna get this game developer, and I don't know.
Yeah, and start building. I think the Maryland STEM Festival. I'm not exactly sure. They've been running for a few years before I had signed up to work on the game with them.
Okay.
But they were the director worked in government for a few decades, and then decided to start the Maryland STEM Festival and have a bunch of kids have a bunch of different science fairs of sorts throughout a month time span happen all throughout Maryland. And I think I think Phil may not have had a lot of game developers there. I remember trying to get game developers to come to these STEM festivals.
Makes perfect sense,
Yeah,
it really does.
Every aspect of video game design is based in STEM. It even extends through STEM and becomes STEAM with the artistic aspects of game design.
Oh, true that. Yep.
Yeah, and it was so difficult to get kids to come out, to get developers to come out to showcase for their events and talk to kids. It's weird. You would think that more developers would want to just go out there and talk to kids about making video games, and they get to showcase their game there too. But it was very hard. I remember I only got one company to come out to showcase and talk to kids about game development, and then so Phil. I think he just knew me as the most reliable game developer that would come out there, and he just reached out to me first. And I remember he was reaching out to people in different groups online, but I don't know if anybody went for it or tried out or talked to him or anything like that.
There's a missed opportunity for them. I think it's great that you had that partnership and that you got to develop this game, which it's an awesome game. I mean, and I think I can't wait to play a later version of it. I guess obviously the thing that I played is an fairly early version of it, but I have to admit the thing that kept drawing me to it was the screenshots that you were sharing with that planet. But then once I got into the game, like I said, then I was pulled into it more and more because of each of these different mechanics. How you linked farming and you're educating people on how farming works. And then you've linked it with these different gameplay mechanics that keep it fresh. So it's a very neat concept, and I'm glad that you got to build it, and I'm glad that you had that partnership. Like I said, more developers should definitely be doing stuff like that. I'd be interested to partake somehow if I could. I'd be honest with you. I mean, we like to show off. I was going to say some of the games here in Norfolk with some of the schools and stuff have done some of that. So a lot of when I'm looking at your pictures and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's like some of the stuff that we've done either with Norfolk Collegiate or with Norfolk Public Schools, where we've gone in and talked to students and stuff and showed them. And even at PixelFest, a lot of the times I feel like you got that same type of vibe because there were so many kids at this particular, at PixelFest, as compared to something like a MAGFest or something like that, where it skews a little bit older. And it gets you really pumped up when you see the kids. They get so excited when you know what I mean. It's a whole other ball of wax.
That was actually something that surprised me a lot too. When showcasing ergonomics at these different events, we went to what is the name? It's such a long. It was what is the name of this event? There's this event that happens in DC at the DC Convention Center every 2 years. It's a massive science fair.
Okay.
It's like 300,000 people.
Wow. Okay.
Attend. Oh man,
that's crazy.
They even have like a space shuttle, not a space shuttle, but they have a like jets inside of the convention center, and they go all out. It's a huge STEM event. I
need a research person like Joe Rogan. Hey, what's that thing in DC? What's that thing? What?
Look at
I don't have
the
anybody working for me. Oh wow.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't remember the name of it, but we did that 2 years ago. I actually just got an email from the director earlier yesterday. He just signed up for it for this event that happened in April. But the game was really early. We didn't even have half of the challenges like in the game.
Oh wow.
At this time,
Okay.
and he wanted to showcase it at this big event, and it was a huge opportunity to get this game out there. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll move some things around development wise, and I'll get a build ready so that it's playable from start to finish. But it was not nowhere near the level it's at right now.
Right.
But we pieced it together, and we went out and we showcased these kids, and the kids were able to till the soil, plant the seed. They were able to till the soil, set up a water irrigation system, plant the seed, and then protect their crops while they were growing. But there was only one challenge, which was to protect it from these rabbits who wanted to come in and eat the crops. And so, like, the kids sat there after tilling the soil, planting the seed, and set up the water irrigation system, and then planting the seed. Like, they became so invested in their crops that when the rabbits came to try to eat them, they were going nuts.
Oh man.
Yeah. You can see that they had a lot of investment in it, and they were like they were trying so hard. They were working. The kids were working together. They were all like huddled around each other, trying to figure out how to set up the water irrigation system, and combining the memories. Because the idea behind agronomics is not just to show how STEM plays a role in modern day agriculture, but also to exercise memorization, hand-eye coordination, pattern recognition, and resource management skills. And we needed to create small little games that can exercise those parts of the kid's brain and keep them engaged in the gameplay while learning something as well.
Yeah, I think you hit all of those goals. I mean, it has all that. So definitely great job. So one thing I want to ask you about is the award for presents at MAGFest, the Tony Powell Award for presents. How do you know about that? When we told you, because Henry won that award in 2017, and I don't know if you were at MAGFest. I don't think you were there that year, but there was this award named after you.
That's actually so wild. So like, it was crazy. I get this a bunch of tweets coming to me one night, and they're like, "Hey, your name is on this projector screen on MAGFest. This is an award for you." And I was like, "An award? I couldn't even attend that year because I've been working on these types of games and stuff, these educational games." And like, I was like, "Oh man, I couldn't." At first I thought it was a joke, right? I thought it was somebody like messing around. and then like more and more people started tweeting me saying, "Hey, no, there's an award with your name on it and stuff." And I was like, "What? That's crazy." And then so the actual people who were running the MAGFest assured me that it wasn't a joke. And there's an actual award named for me. And then it happened again the next year, and I was like, "Oh my goodness." They had like an actual trophy and everything. I was like, "No way."
It's a thing because Tony Powell has so much presence. If you ever come back to Norfolk to PixelFest, and we hope that you can join us again sometime, people have to come. They have to meet you and see the way you show off your game, see the way you engage the crowd. See, you're always smiling, you're always bringing people up, and it was like, I mean, honestly, I feel like I learned a lot about how to show off my game from watching you. To be honest with you, at the I think every indie should learn something by watching Tony Powell show off his game.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. And also the other thing, it was a big deal. Whenever we were at a con, and obviously we met because of PixelFest because you knew Henry. But then when we came to MAGFest in 2000, it was MAGFest. It was 2017, and you got all the indies together, and no, actually, I'm sorry, it was at SmashCon. It was probably at both, but at SmashCon certainly. You remember because you were showing off Mighty Mashers like right next to us. We had the Swap Fire booth there.
Yeah, we went to that Buffalo.
Yeah, so you kind of did like all this community. You built like a mini community just for like the 2 days that was going on, which was awesome.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, man, that was fantastic. So, and I imagine that's also part of the reason why there's an actual award named after you for whenever you go to these cons, you bring the community together and everybody just has a good time. So
Yeah, it's always a blast hanging out with so many brilliant people. Like it's hard not to get excited because we're sitting in front of a keyboard and a screen all day, 90% of the time. But that 10% of the time we get to travel and see our friends, and it's always a great time. I mean, like with you, Henry, so many people in the Baltimore area,
Yep.
DC area, brilliant minds, game development minds, and warm hearts. It's always great to be around you guys.
Definitely. Yeah, you make an excellent point there that people, I don't know if people miss it, or it's one of the probably lesser thought of details of developing games, which is that yes, you spend a tremendous amount of time by yourself with just your keyboard, studying over, poring over your code or your design, and whenever you finally break from that, there's actually a period of time where you have to almost reacclimate yourself to being a person, where you're like, yes, I'm going to be chipper and happy again. And, when you have a good day coding and you're like, yes, I had victory today, everything went well, you come out and you're like, yeah. But if you couldn't solve a problem, like you ran out of time for the day and you had to get on with life, but you didn't solve the problem, then you come out of it still thinking about the problem, potentially ignoring the people around you and stuff like that. So it's I don't know if you have the same thing, but that kind of seems like what it is,
Every single time. Even I have a hard time going to sleep if I can't solve the problem.
I've solved some good problems in my sleep. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night, like that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just stepping away from it also gets the mind going.
I was gonna say I personally have gotten better about that. So I used to be the worst at stepping away. I would not step away until it was solved, and I would find myself frequently staying at the computer all night till the sun came up. I mean, sometimes I would just keep going. I had days where I would work a whole day, stay up all night, sun would come up, and I would just get right back into another day, and I wouldn't go to sleep. And I did that on more times than I should have because I don't think it was probably good for my health, but I did it.
It's a quick way to burn out too,
Yep.
to burn out from the project.
Yeah. But yeah, these days I'm like, you know what? I don't know what it is. Let me go, point my mind in a different direction for a little while. And yeah, usually there's some background process in your brain that's still trying to solve that problem. And you'll be just like washing the dishes or whatever and be like, bing, got it. Okay. Let me go type that code out,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it took me years just to have faith in that process of figuring something like the answer will come eventually. Yeah. It is something that I think more developers should really embrace too, is taking that time off, letting the mind soak in the information and figure out what the issue is, and then coming back to it and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, it does work. So anybody that's a little bit newer to the game, don't try to do it all in one sitting. That's for sure. Get up, take breaks often. I don't know. I remember when I got into it, man. I was just so. You even saw me at SmashCon. I don't know if you remember. I mean, this is after I've been developing games for so long, and I can still get like this. But Henry was showing off Swapfire, and I was cranking behind the TV on the laptop, running builds out, and then putting the builds on the Wii U dev kit. And it wasn't the dev kit; it was a demo kit. But I'm putting them on the Wii demo kit and iterating every time people came up to as often as we could. I got so much done that weekend, but it was stuff like that where.
I remember thinking to myself, I was like, "Man, you might end up making a bug, man."
Yeah. Oh, I made them and then I fixed them. People would come up and the Wii U would be frozen, be like, "No, hold on, we'll fix it in a second." Or I'd be like, I know what that is." We actually did get a lot done that weekend, though, and I'm just thankful that I was there with Henry, with somebody else that could, and Henry was the greatest at showing off the game. He had the, he really could be like an esports commentator or something. I mean, he's just got this, that's why he won your award in 2017. So he said, "Hey, I won the Tony Powell Award for Presidents." Like, what? There's an award named after Tony Powell, and you won it. Makes perfect sense.
Henry has this natural enthusiasm about the work that he's doing and the games that he's working on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was. I'm trying to think. I wanted to. I'm trying to think. When we were making Swapfire and we created that spectator mode, which most people don't know about. But Henry, we would go out to like local breweries and set the game up, and he would just get on the gamepad and go crazy and get everybody all amped up. He did it at MAGFest also, so
Awesome. Yeah, that
yeah,
sounds like Henry.
yep. He wrote people into the game, and you're like, what is this guy yelling about? But then that would draw you into it. So. And then that at SmashCon it just worked out because I was just sitting, like I said, I was just sitting behind the TV going on the keyboard, fixing bugs, fixing any gameplay related issues, all that type of stuff. But these I would say Swapfire is the last project where I spent weeks or months of consecutive 20+ hour days developing something. And after I did that project, that's when I said, okay, I can't do that again. It's not gonna happen again. So now I always try to take steps back. I try to let it come to me. Don't try to force it so much. And and at PixelFest 2018, we had a number of we actually had Grant Schonkweiler, who's a producer on Fortnite. Akash Thakar, who I said, you and I were talking earlier, and I mentioned that he was the composer on Hyperlight Drifter, and I'm trying to think, and then we had Jean Simonet, who he worked on, oh gosh, I have it on my Switch, the famous Bethesda game.
Oh, Fallout?
Yeah, well, no, was it Bethesda? I can't remember. Skyrim. Sorry, Skyrim. So he worked on Skyrim, and I think every one of these guys got up there and basically was like, "Hey, don't kill yourself making a game. Take some time away." So to me, it seems like this is the message that's starting to come out of the industry a little bit. Is like, don't crunch, don't do all this stuff. People did it for years, and everybody that's like in their 40s is like falling apart. And I actually did. I don't know if you've seen any episodes of the PixelCast, but episode 5, I think it was. I'm trying to think if it was 5. I actually got into, and this is a little bit of a grim side to it, but I got into all the obituaries on Gama Sutra. I don't know if you've paid any attention to that over the years. Whenever a game developer passes away, there'll be an obit, and they'll put it up on Gama Sutra. And I've been reading those for a long time now. I mean, I think the first one was posted in 2004 or something like that, and I've been reading Gama Sutra for over 20 years. But I started paying attention, closer and closer attention to each one. So for that PixelCast, I got in and I actually compiled a giant spreadsheet of all of those obituaries, and I noticed that the average age of those obituaries was only 58 years old.
Wow, are you serious?
Yeah, so which is 20 years less than the national average, right? So it just got me doing some thinking about some of the health related issues that come along with sitting somewhere for 20 hours and maybe pounding soft drinks to try to stay caffeinated. I mean, there were all these, like, I don't know, is it the word tropes? There are all these sort of cliches, if you will, of game development. And if you read about the early magazines that were trying to hype kids up, I think in the 90s to get into game development. But there are all these people talking about what does it take? You got to crunch, you got to work all these hours, you got to, stay caffeinated and whatever. You eat whatever food you can get. You're not making like the healthiest meals because you're so caught up in trying to make the perfect game. And, meanwhile, what we're seeing now is, hey, wait a minute, this is really not healthy for you. This isn't good. So people do need to, get in, solve their problems, or at least approach their problems. Maybe solve them when they're not sitting at the keyboard. They could be doing anything when the idea to that problem comes to them. But certainly take the time to exercise. Certainly take the time to make healthy meals. Take some time away from the computers and all that stuff. Get outside, like farming, whatever. Go make a garden. Do that. And
yeah, I remember in college, like that was I went to school for video game art and design at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And I remember that that was the culture. They were, oh, you got to work hard. You got to be here 18 to 20 hours a day, like getting these projects done. And it wore me down so much to the point where I had developed a bit of anxiety for development,
right.
which it never happened before. Like I was developing games for 5 or 6 years before I went to college for it.
Okay.
And like I would happily stay in front of the computer for 10, 12 hours a day
Right.
and stuff. And I still had a full-time job. Like I still was I had like a social life and stuff like that. Time to work out, time to do sports and stuff like that. But I would also find time in the week to sit down all day, for like 8, 10, 12 hours a day and just crank out work and stuff.
Right.
And it was beautiful. But then after I went to college for it and being immersed in that, you have to work 16, 18, 20-hour days, crunch, even on the first week of the semester,
Wow.
Like, yeah, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But it messed with my like subconscious, I guess, in a way, and stuff like that for development. And I continued that development process into my 30s, it was just not good. It was just not good. So like now, in the last, I want to say like 5 or 6 years or so, my body, my mind automatically just takes breaks away, and like I'll step away and I'll deal with other things that I have to do with the company, or I'll deal with things in life in general. But in the background, my brain is still I'm still designing the game.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still running through design iterations. So I'm consciously thinking about the work. It's not so much subconscious. Sometimes it is, but I'm consciously thinking about the work, but I'm not sitting in front of a keyboard and stuff. And then I'll come up with the decision of a direction that I want to go. And then as soon as I get to the keyboard, it just flows smoothly.
Yep.
And so
it actually comes out quicker that way, because then you've thought about it so much that you're not rapid prototyping, maybe 3 or 4 varieties of it at the keyboard before you come to a decision. So
exactly. And the time it takes to compile, to prototype, all that is already done in my head. I can move forward from there. Now, I do make bugs and do make mistakes about how to go about it, but most of the work is already figured out.
Yeah.
Like that.
No, I'm kind of finding the same thing, and I think I think it's a good thing. First of all, that it might be the type of thing that only comes to you after you've been developing long enough. It sounds like you've been developing for over 10 years, 10 or 15 years, something like that.
I think I was 19 years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So you're getting close to your 20. Look at that.
Wow.
So it goes by quick, doesn't it? But yeah, I mean, at this point, I think when you've been developing for that long, you know the technology well enough. You know what the computer can do. You know all the APIs. I mean, you know what you can do, and you're in your mind. This stuff just gets strung together now, and you don't have to. I guess we actually had an episode of the PixelCast with Nathan Jester, and we talked about the difference between like these really higher level thoughts where you really have to process each step, and then after you've put your 10,000 hours in or whatever the rule is for mastery, and you've internalized all these processes, and now all of a sudden, you're sort of at a next level in terms of your skill or your skill set. So you don't have to just sit there and bang away on the keyboard forever and ever and ever to make something happen. And in fact, you're probably better off not doing that, and you're better off just really kicking back, thinking about the people that are going to be using the product, being a little bit more empathetic, and coming up with all of those thoughts before you even sit down at the keyboard. I can't say that that's something that you can probably do when you're young and you just don't know all of what you can do with the computer. And you don't have a code structure yet. There's a lot of things that take time to achieve, your whole workflow and everything like that. And it does seem like you have to make some mistakes before you can get to the point where you're just like, yeah, I'm going to make this and sit down and do it. I had a conversation with somebody just the other week where I was like, yeah, this is going to be my approach. And he was like, you could see exactly how you're going to do that through, and it was a relatively complicated thing. I was like, yeah, I got it right here. It's like, I knew what I was going to do. And, it's nice to get to the point where it's internalized and you've sort of achieved this mastery of of your tools, and you can, you just see how you're going to do it, and then you sit down and you just do it.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely. Yeah. It does take that time. And I remember when I was just getting started, like making games in high school, and like a friend of mine, he actually worked on one of the Doom titles, and he also worked on Morrowind as well.
Oh,
He was
nice.
still in high school at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, his name is Blau Manchurian.
Okay.
He got me into the 3D side of making video games, and I remember we had a 2D animation for a web design class together, and he was talking about how he was working on Doom. I think it was Doom 3 actually.
Nice.
And he was
in high school.
Yeah,
That's
in high
awesome.
school. Yeah, I mean, he was maybe a few months younger than me.
Right.
We had many of the same classes together. I remember him telling me about this. I was like, dude, I want to learn how to do 3D. And he told me it takes 10,000 hours, and I was like, I don't care. I got that time.
Sign me up.
Yeah, and he was like, he's like, okay, well, I'll tell you what, after school, come by my place, and I'll get you started with. This was back with 3D Studio Max 3. Oh my goodness!
You're going back.
Man.
You're going back. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness. First he showed me how to use Milkshake though, because he said.
Oh yeah, that man. I use Milkshake. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, man.
Gosh.
Something that goes old school.
Do you remember Wings? Do you remember Wings 3D? Did you ever use that?
No, I never got to use that.
Wings. I used Milkshake, Wings. I'm trying. There was something called Doga. Do you remember that? It was like a Japanese like shape modeler. It was really good at doing like robots and tanks and stuff like that, spaceships.
Yeah, yeah. I went from Milkshake to G-Max.
Yep.
Max 3, and then from 3 up to like 8 or 9, 3D Studio Max 8 or 9, and
right.
then I just walked away after that point. I think Autodesk had purchased Maya
right
at that time too, and that's when things started tanking. I was in school at the time. I was like, oh god, all these bugs and glitches. I can't do these simple things and crashes and stuff like that.
It is tough when a software gets to a certain point where it does seem buggier because the company has gotten bigger. I've noticed a little bit of that with Unity. It's actually been pretty stable lately, but over the last couple of years, I think I've seen some growing pains as they've expanded their engineering team. And there's actually a pretty cool Steve Jobs talk on what happens when you add a new developer to a development team. There's like a law or something where I forgot the name of the law, but when you're adding people to a team and the cost of the communication to the team members exceeds the productivity. So, you notice these growing pains when people think they're just going to throw people at the problem. Like, hey, we'll get more developers and it'll become better. And it's actually, sometimes it's detrimental because now the old developers have to tell the new developers and catch them up to speed. And, they're working on stuff, but if the communication between the developers isn't, high enough, then the product actually suffers from that. So.
Absolutely, yeah. I've noticed that as well with the different social media platforms as well. Like, like the usability just tanks and stuff, or the user experience tanks.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that's exactly what happened with Autodesk back in the day. Now I don't know if they had fixed it because when shortly after Autodesk had purchased Maya, I went ahead and moved to Blender.
Yep.
And started using Blender a lot. And I just basically, as a matter of fact, I finished school using nothing but Blender instead of,
hey.
And I would import my work into 3D Studio Max saying, yeah, get it over here.
Hey, Blender's like been the longest running, I think, sort of like small time 3D program. I mean, because that's an open source tool, and it's still going to this day, which is great. Because people were using Blender and talking about Blender even back with Milkshake. And did you ever use Ultimate Unwrap with I'm trying to think. Did you have to use that with Milkshake to do? It was like a really good independent UV mapping tool. So if you didn't, yeah.
In the time I was using Milkshake, I wasn't onto texturing and UV wrapping.
Okay.
My friend was just like the 3D Studio, like the modeling aspects.
Okay.
Moving vertices and edge loops and stuff. But by the time I got to texturing, oh man, like I was using Gmax, and like they didn't have an official texturing, official unwrapping feature to it.
Oh.
I would have to break up the 3D model. Oh, it was terrible. I would have to break up the 3D model and stuff, right? And then like make my own 3D UV layout, and then like paint the UVs on top of that body part,
Right.
and then like attach that. Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
Man, the stuff that we went through.
Yeah.
Now you
Oh,
can just, I guess everything's kind of moving to you can just paint right onto the model in a lot of cases. I'm actually looking into doing like a photogrammetry thing with HoloLens right now. Is one of the projects that I'm working on, and so I'm going to be looking at doing like a 3D UV painting process, and in order to do some photogrammetry, I think I'm heading in that direction. So I haven't actually written any of that myself in the past. I haven't really had to. I mean, I've done some basic like mesh painting, but nothing too serious. So it'll be interesting to dive into that side of things.
yeah, that would be really cool. I hear a lot of things about photogrammetry being like really, really amazing for creating either objects or entire environments.
Yeah, what's cool because you're getting the geometry and the texture at the same time, so it's like a 3D scan. There's actually an iPhone app called Clone with a Q. It's like Qlone. Now you have to download a marker, but it's kind of neat. You can scan any little object that fits on this marker. So actually, I tried to. I had this Ninja Turtle that I modeled out of Play-Doh I was playing with my daughter, and I wanted to 3D scan it, so I stuck it up there on the marker on a Lazy Susan and spun it around to try to 3D scan it. The turtle was falling apart and the scan didn't come out well, but it's kind of neat. And yeah, I think photogrammetry is gonna play a big role as we're moving into a lot of mixed reality development. I don't know if you've had your eye on any of that stuff, but there's all manner of needs for really quick, photogrammetric scanning. We're going to need that type of stuff because the world is going to want to have a digital twin of every physical object that's in existence, and the only way to do it fast enough is, I think, using photogrammetry. So.
Yeah, totally agree and stuff. I've actually been keeping that on the radar a little bit while I work on these current projects, because I think a future project will be using AR, VR, but more leaning towards the AR side of things.
Right.
But I like photogrammetry to help me create the dimensions of an object before I create it and before I give it its art pass and stuff.
Right. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, just getting like a rough of it and getting the bound. If you're doing something to scale, certainly, yeah, just getting the dimensions of it. Using a rough, just like depending on what you're doing, I guess, to fit it into your scenes and stuff like that. If you're prototyping, yeah, you can put a rough in and use it as a placeholder. And even if that was just a quick scan, even if it was with something like Clone, that would be great. I really am looking forward to being able to just do it with the iPhone without a marker and on any size object. I don't think we're there yet. I haven't checked in a couple of months, but I'll have to look back and see where we're at with that. Now, one of the things I've got Mighty Masters here. Earlier in this episode, we mentioned that you started working on the game in 2013, but you're still gunning to get this game out and you haven't released it in any commercial format yet. Is that correct?
Yep, correct. Yep.
So I'm trying to think. You've been showing this game off at all these different shows and everything like that, and you've built up quite a fan base for Philosoplay, and it's almost all based on Mighty Masters. Is that also correct?
Correct. Yeah, for the most part. Yep.
Which is pretty cool because I noticed you have about 3,500 followers on Twitter, and that's all from taking Mighty Masters to different conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome. So what platform do you think you're gonna release this thing on when you finally put it out onto the commercial market?
So the official ones I know I'll be able to get the game out on first is going to be PC, iOS, Android devices.
Okay.
Really tried hard to get it on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and things like that. Nintendo Switch. But the amount of they want to have I realized that I have to become like a partner with those organizations.
Okay.
Of some sort. And I thought about that, and I thought about going the publisher route, and I thought about going a lot of different routes, and I'm just not 100% sure that I have the funds to do that like on launch day. It's
Right.
something that I'll probably consider doing once I put the game out on PC, iOS, and Android, and gathered some funds from that to eventually port it over into consoles and get the help that I need to get it on those platforms. I've had like a number of friends that I met in the industry, like say that they want to like publish the game and
Right.
put it on these platforms. And it's something that I'm keeping in the back of my head, like and keeping those contacts saying, hey, that could very well happen and stuff. I need more time. I need to get more funding and stuff like that. But it could very well happen. I've been putting like money aside for from the contract work and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
so to help pay for promotional material and things like that, and also to complete the game. But like I would still need like development kits for the PlayStation and the PlayStation 4, or now the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, the new systems are, on the Xbox and PlayStation side, those have been announced. Now, it strikes me that this game would actually work really well on the Switch. And the Switch dev kit, from what I understand, I don't know directly because I haven't been privy to one yet, but I've heard that it's pretty inexpensive to get on the Switch. And I think from me dealing with Nintendo, I think the case is that they're looking for games that are done, that are ready to go, really before they're going to give you a dev kit. And so I have to say, though, I think Mighty Masters will work very well on the Switch. And that is something that I think you could approach them without a publisher, because there are a ton of indie games on the Switch. It's all indie games essentially at this point.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't have a Switch on me just yet. And they were one of the companies that I really wanted to get Mighty Masters on. So,
yeah. I bet if you applied tomorrow, that by next week you would probably be accepted. I think.
Really?
I think so.
Really?
I think you should head over to their dev portal. If you don't have a link after we do this, I'll send you the link. And I bet if you apply that you'll be on board.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give that a shot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try this week to get onto their game, because I applied like a while ago, like a year and a half ago or something like that, maybe a year, and I just didn't have any luck, so I just focused back on the PC and the mobile versions. With that as a secondary or tertiary goal.
Right. There's a lot of indie games on there, man. There are a ton, and if it's been a year and a half or so, I think I think that hopefully, if it's been that long since you applied, I think give it another shot, and you have a playable game, right? So you can send them like, here's the game, and they can play it.
Yeah, they could play that game. They wouldn't be able to play it on the Switch, but I could put it up on a temporary secure browser for them to test it out on.
And you can play like 3-4. I'm sorry, you can play like 3-4 player on it, right?
You could play 3-player on there, but I actually had to remove the online component when I added power-ups into the game. So, and since that time, Photon, which is the API, the networking API I'm using, their Unity, they released a second version. So I'm going to update the online multiplayer aspect of the game to incorporate the API that Photon 2 offers. And then probably then like try to release it on the consoles and stuff like that.
You need the deterministic physics. The deterministic. The new Photon is like a deterministic network environment.
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking for? Nice.
Yeah, I really want to get get the game updated. Get the online multiplayer components updated with Photon 2.
I was going to say, still though, on the Switch, if you have a version that's local multiplayer, that's probably going to be what sells it. At least for me. Obviously I love local multiplayer. I'm sure that they value that just as much. Yeah. So if you've got a version of the game where it's they can get on and play it, and you've got all the local multiplayer, it just seems like such a shoo-in for that system. Was it called Mighty Masters a year and a half ago? Had you already changed the branding on it?
I changed that probably. No, I definitely changed that in 2019. I believe. So it's probably been Mighty Masters for maybe 9 months.
Okay. Huh. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. It was probably just that they had a deluge of games that they were working with, and now I think things have slowed down a little bit, because I I take a peek at the new release list on the Switch all the time. The Switch is the system that I play the most. And so I'm always checking out the new release list and keeping my eye on it. It seems that the number of games coming out per week has decreased quite a bit from what it was. And
Wow.
so I think that it's probably a good time to, if you've got something that's like done, like your game is, and
Yeah.
you're ready to pitch it. And gosh, I mean, I hope, I just, like I said, man, it seems like a shoe-in for that console. So maybe give it another try and hopefully it'll work out for you.
I'll go ahead and give that another try
Yeah,
later on
man.
this week. I'll shoot you an email if that's okay, and just to get like the final like, okay, this is the procedure that I should go
Yeah,
to through going through that. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
definitely, definitely. Now you got this, man. I love this picture of you with the class. There's a whole bunch of kids. You're giving a big thumbs up. You can't see this right now because this is the background here. But can you speak a little bit more to the situation? Obviously coming in, the kids are excited. Games draw them in, and so like you said at some of the festivals, you've got NASA and all these big organizations there at these STEM festivals, but the kids are coming over to you, the indie game developer, because you've brought the game and stuff. But you were also talking a little bit before we got on the show about the situation in these schools and what they're dealing with. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure, yeah. So like naturally going to a lot of these events and showcasing my game, a lot of kids come and play it, and they bring their parents too,
Mm-hmm.
and their parents want to know more about game development because they're thinking about it as a potential career path for their kids, and so they asked me to come to some of these career days. So I would go to some of them, and some of these career days are in like Baltimore County schools. And when I was a kid, I did go to Baltimore County School. I went to Edmonton Heights Elementary School and Southwest Academy Middle School. And so I know a little bit about how the Baltimore kids community are. And that was back in the 90s, though. But
Right.
now, I mean, there has been, like, in terms of kids having the opportunity to learn new things technologically wise, it's kind of bad in some of those schools, and a lot of the kids, they're in situations where they can't really learn how to make a video game. They can't express their imagination that way. They don't have access to making apps. A lot of the kids that I talk to live in communities where that type of thing isn't encouraged very much. I mean, there are a small group of people who try to push the kids, like some of the teachers, some of the faculties in some of the schools do try to push the kids into learning how to program, learning how to use their imagination to create digital interactive content, but they just don't have someone who's in that field doing it, like whose feet are on the ground and they're actually making a living at this. So I would go to some of these schools and talk to these kids about what to expect, how to go about taking something that an idea, a thought, or a dream and transforming it into an interactive experience that you can share with the world. And these kids, it's like they're hanging on every single word. I mean, like you can tell.
Yes.
Like I used to be one of those chatty kids, the ones who used to talk all the time and get attention and have to write sentences and stuff. Cause the teachers couldn't
No way, no way, not you, no.
Yeah, believe it or not. But yeah, and I can tell the kids who are the chatty ones. I can tell the kids who are just waiting for a disruption in the normal everyday process of them going to school, listen to the teacher, and it kind of because for me it would give me an out to goof off, but I can tell that even these kids are hanging on my every word about how to make a video game and what the process is, and like. Even the teachers sometimes have come up to me and says, I'm surprised that this group of kids were quiet the whole class because they're the ones that talk the most, and they were asking you all these questions, and that was great. I could see that they were totally engaged, and they've known these kids for 2 or 3 years already,
Right.
So it's like it's really amazing to see how far games have had an impact in our culture. Because I do also remember a time. and you can attest to this too. I'm sure you dealt with this as well. Like 20 years ago or so, trying to explain to people that you want to make video games for a living and having them look at you like, oh, you want to be a kid, you don't want to grow up.
Yep.
You know, like you play video games all day.
That's not a thing. Like, you can't do that. Get a real job.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I remember having to deal with that so many times.
There was a stigma. Yeah,
I now have parents come up to me asking me, hey, can you talk to my kid about making video games for a career? I mean, they're really thinking about, and they don't even know that this is a $100 billion industry. It's
grown huge now, yeah, because of the mobile market. It's blown it up so big, and it's worldwide. Yeah, it's a gigantic market. Not to mention that even if you develop that skill set as a teenager or younger, and even if you're making a game as an indie or whatever, like you said, you've mentioned just on this episode a couple of times, there's all this contract work that you can do, and you can do that making software in any field once you're making a game. And you can still have that option of one day making the hit game. So it's going to pay the bills no matter what. Anyway, you're going to, that's the way that I feel about it is you get this skill set, you're going to have a lot of fun pursuing it and learning because you're going to be doing it through your passion. And then, it's something that you're just in, a lot of young people are just engaged in. And, you were, and yeah, you're still going to be able to pay the bills. You're still going to be able to land work in a lot of other fields. The skill set is at this point, because computers were running everything. The skill set is ubiquitous. So it's a good way to make a living.
Absolutely. And I think more and more parents, because we're the parents now. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but like we're the same age and stuff, and like absolutely, like they're taking it more seriously, and I wonder like where will it be 20 years from now?
It's going to be interesting with what's going on with machine learning and AI. I know about 7-8 years ago, even 10 years ago, I remember I was cranking out iterations of an iPhone game using Unity, thinking, gosh, could I make a program that would crank these iterations out for me, scrape the reviews off the App Store, and then make new builds and learn as it was going, and just kind of do the whole process for me, depending on the game. And I think that in a lot of fields, what we're going to see is that transition to using machine learning and artificial intelligence, to rapid iterate some of the more, I guess, boring aspects of development, hopefully, which could be nice. And it'll probably let more people in because, right now, it's still a limited number of people that are willing to get in and write C# code and, kind of dig through, just getting through Unity itself is a little bit of a task. And we have it easier than the generation before us. I mean, you go back to some of those older tools. Oh, Tony, I downloaded the Super Nintendo developer manual. Did you know that was open sourced?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Nintendo open sourced this thing like 4 years ago. And I didn't know I didn't know any of that stuff was open sourced. And I was asking a former Super Nintendo developer, some information about it. I wanted to, do some stuff for the PixelCast, but I ended up downloading it. You go back through and look what they were dealing with in like the early 90s. And it's like, I'm looking at it right here. It's like right beside me, but I forgot how many pages. It's hundreds of pages of just engineering schematics. Like nothing even approaching what I would consider like documentation that you see, for example, with Unity. And some people might be confused by the documentation in Unity, but generally speaking, it comes with a list of the API, and then there are even some examples of how to use it in there, stuff like that. And you look at this thing, and it's just all engineering schematics, and you have to piece it together and figure out. You have to know and then piece it together from what they did. So the stuff that they built back then, I had a lot of respect for what they did. I have even more respect for what they did now.
Oh my goodness, that's insane.
Yep.
Like I can only imagine what it would look like without the proper the documentation that we have today. That's gotta be crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean it's incredible what people did back then, and that's why there were fewer people. I mean, back then I think a game was considered a hit if it had 100,000 sales. That was considered a pretty big deal, or even a system having 100,000 units out was a big deal. So we were dealing with a very small sliver of the population with gaming, way back in the day. And the NES obviously blew that up a little bit, and games started selling more and more and more. But yeah, I mean, we were nowhere near where we're at now, where it's essentially ubiquitous. Almost everybody plays games, and I think Unity has an excess of 10 million developers now signed up with it. So there's like now we have not only obviously billions of people are playing games, but we actually have tens of millions of developers using the most popular game development tool. So which is pretty encouraging.
That is
Um, Now, with sort of going back to the classroom, because I've had a little bit of experience with this. I've taught in schools and done those programs through PixelFest. We've done boot camps in the area. I did a partnership. We actually went into, essentially I'm trying to think how to describe the area. We basically went into a neighborhood where there were not a lot of resources and so on and so forth. There was a community center that had computers and things like that. But I might say that some of the kids were at risk. I think that's a fair assessment. I actually had one of the most heartbreaking things happen to me. It didn't happen to me, but that I experienced. I went in and I did a pitch saying, "Hey," and it was with like 3 or 4 other people. So I was there representing game development. There was somebody else there that was representing website development. Somebody else was there that was going to be showing these kids how to do mapping. And there was somebody else there that was, and I don't remember what the fourth person. There was 3 or 4 of us that were coming in, and we did this meetup. And we said, hey, we're going to try to pass down some of these technology skills sets to you, right? And, this is in an effort to try to help cultivate some education where maybe there wasn't some before. And, so a number of people came up to sign up for game development. I think it was quite popular, as you expressed before. Although I definitely saw some kids in the audience who were like, I don't believe you. I basically said, hey, I'm going to show you how to make a game with Unity. And, Unity is the same tool that was used to make Pokemon Go, which is something that is worth in excess of $1 billion now. This game's generated a ton of revenue. So there's no reason why you can't go out and make the next $1 billion, hit game. That could happen, if you learn this tool. Now, the crazy thing that happened though was one of the kids that signed up for this class, which was going to be like a couple of weeks after we were doing this pitch. So we did the pitch, and then the class was going to be a week or 2 later. One of the kids was actually killed before the class,
wow.
which was incredibly sad thing. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. The guy that was really helping us organize it was Kevin Curry, and he said, like, literally their lives at risk, if we don't get in and start helping out with this. And that's something I need to circle back with him and see how things are going with that. But that was just one of the programs that I've participated in over the years. And the one thing that I will say I notice is sometimes when you're in those environments, I notice, I guess, a lack of, I don't know, is it belief? I don't know if it's belief or hope or something. It's like, hey, you could go in there and offer to try to help educate people. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. Some of the kids are like, they don't believe you. I don't know how to describe it, but there's some sort of barrier there at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely,
you've noticed that?
Yeah, I have. I've actually been told that too by one of the organizers at one of these after school festivals where I got to showcase STEM festivals where I got to showcase my game.
Okay.
And it's happened in Baltimore again. There was a guy who was helping with this event or organizing the event, and he had told me the exact same thing. Is like these kids, some of these kids don't have computers at home, and they don't have the resources to really learn how to build apps or video games or anything like that. And a lot of these kids don't want to go back home. They don't want to go. They want to stay here.
Okay.
As long as they could. It was definitely something that's really, really sad and stuff. And to see, I mean, what you say is 100% real. And one of the reasons why I continuously advocate to other game developers, hey, if you can't find an opportunity to talk to kids about making video games, then make an opportunity to do that.
Definitely.
And then, because these kids, their lives really are in danger. I mean, them just having the outlet, a place to go where they can learn these tools and allow their imagination to create interactive experiences, like keeps them off the street.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't really realize how important that really is. I mean, like I've been fortunate enough to not to only a few times live in neighborhoods that were a little shady and stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I've always been the type of person that tried to seek a creative outlet.
Right.
You know, like and that kept me away from. That's just like by the luck of the draw, I was born with that inclination. But there's a lot of kids who aren't. A lot of kids who just end up meeting the wrong kind of people, just being out and about, and then doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and sometimes losing their life or their freedom.
Right.
And it is sad and stuff. And just being able to talk to a lot of these kids and seeing these teachers know who like a lot of these teachers, they know who's going to be incarcerated or worse. You know, they know which ones are going to be the successful ones. They know in the back of their head that the likelihood of most of them achieving something great in life is kind of low.
Right.
And they might not want to say it out loud. They only talk amongst themselves about it, but they know. And for them for some of the teachers to come say, hey, this kid who never stops shutting up, who never shuts up, who's always talking, who's always disrespectful, he was actually sitting here and hanging on your every word, and to see him actually raise his hand before he spoke, you know, like that I'm very impressed and stuff. And I'm like, wow.
So that means that you're bringing a lot of respect. I mean, they have a lot of respect for you when you go into these classrooms, and I think that is wonderful. It seems to me that you are a model for how to do this and do it successfully. You know, you're making great games. You're doing the STEM stuff. You're doing contract work. I mean, you've got a career doing this. So, I mean, what could be better than that? You know, to come into these classrooms and speak to these kids. That's just, I think that's just incredible.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just hope more developers come out here and do that as well. Like, continue to talk to the kids as much as they can.
Yeah, no, certainly. I love doing it. I don't know. You know, kids, they just have an energy. They're just like, they're excited, and I'm just trying to think. They're curious. You know, they're just. I don't know. I really enjoy teaching. So I've been teaching. We had not just the PixelFest boot camp. So like I said, we had a program through Norfolk Collegiate for the last 6 years, doing the computer science program there and doing dev team. So that's been going for a long time. And actually, one of the things that convinced me to make Swapfire, I don't know if I told you this, was I was doing a summer camp there at that school in 2012, which was like maybe a week after I had done the 7-day FPS, or 2 weeks after I'd done the game jam, where I made the first prototype of Swapfire. So I'm showing these kids how to use Unity and so on and so forth, showing them coding skills. But I would let them play. So I was like, hey guys, I made this game like 2 weeks ago, and I let them play the Swapfire 7-day FPS jam game. And they had so much fun with it that I was like, okay, this I have to keep working on this game. I have to, like, I can't give up on this one. There seems to be something here. These kids are having a blast with it. And every day after I showed it to them, when I would come in for camp, it was like a week-long camp, they would ask me, hey, can we play the game Swapfire again? And I was like, all right, this is cool. So they're motivating, too. When you see kids like a game, you know, they don't lie. You know, if they don't like a game, they just don't come back to it. They're not going to play it again.
Exactly.
You can tell real quick.
They're brutally honest, even when they're not trying to be.
Yes, exactly. That's so funny. It's a funny thing about kids. So, yeah, man. Well, let's see. We're into this PixelCast about an hour and 10 minutes. And I'm trying to think, Tony, is there anything else that's on your mind tonight?
Pretty much. If there were any new updates about when the next PixelFest event was coming up.
All right, we are looking at this spring, and I can't advertise the date just yet because I'm going through I'm still got some paperwork that I'm working on, right? And I've got to get some approval from the city of Norfolk. But when that's done, I will announce the date. Now, I will tell you the date as soon as we end this PixelCast. So, folks at home that are watching this, I'm sorry. I can't tell you just yet. But it's coming together, and I'm really excited about it. So, all right. Well, Tony, I thank you so much for being on with us tonight. And everybody else, thank you for joining us in this latest episode of the PixelCast. And as always, let's all continue growing through love of games. Have a good night.